According to Time magazine, there has been a steady increase in the unemployment rate of college graduates over the last 10 years, from 41% in 2000 to 53% in 2012. How can this be? We live in the US, the land of opportunity, so why are so many college graduates unable to find work? Well, the answer may lie here. How many of you know what the GDP is? For those who don't know, the GDP, or Gross Domestic Product, is the one primary indicator to determine the health of a nation's economy. It represents the total dollar value of all goods and services produced over a given year, and it's usually expressed in comparison to the previous quarter or year. Now, why should you care about the GDP? You should care, because a lower GDP expresses an unhealthy economy, which has a direct relationship to economic growth and job creation. In the graph above, you can see the US is projected to have a lower GDP in the 2013 year. What this means is jobs are going to be progressively harder to find and the economy is going to retract, preventing more jobs from being created. So you go through an expensive college education only to find out you cannot get a job afterwards while unpaid debts loom over your head. Not really motivating if you ask me. So how can the nation fix this? Well, if you look at the second picture, you can see the estimated total volume of the US marijuana market last year. $76 billion is certainly a lot of money, and much could be done with that money. Now, what if this market could, say, become an income source? It would certainly boost the US's economy and raise the GDP. Think about how that money could be used to create jobs for you and me, and boost the economy. Think about how that money could be used to fund underfunded programs like, say, education. Think about all the productive uses of that $76 billion. Now the question becomes, how can the US and other nations access the massive market surrounding marijuana and put the money to good productive use? Put simply, nations have to legalize marijuana. Marijuana is a recreational drug used by many people around the globe. Its use can be traced back to 7000 BC. But in the past 50 years, many countries have taken a stand against marijuana and have deemed it illegal. The Drug Enforcement Administration of the U.S. and the International War on Drugs are measures taken to eradicate marijuana as well as other drugs, thereby preventing public use. Because of this ban, crime rates have soared and the illegal drug trade has become much more widespread and profitable. A study done by the United Nations in the report titled World Drug Report 2005 estimates the illegal drug market to be worth $320 billion and rising by a figure of 30% a year. This study was the most recent official growth rate estimate of the illegal drug market. In 2010, a study conducted by the Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, estimates the total amount spent on all things drug-related in the U.S. to be $1 trillion over the last 40 years. So far, Colorado and Washington are the only places in the U.S. to legalize marijuana for recreational use. Other nations, such as the Netherlands and Germany, have already legalized marijuana and are moving toward more regulation. However, many are still skeptical. From these studies, it's clear there is much money being spent on marijuana prohibition and much money surrounding the illegal market. So why are nations like the U.S. choosing to fight against such a profitable market? And why are they still content on wasting colossal amounts of money to end the drug market? Clearly, this is not an effective use of money because there's still currently a war on drugs and the market is actually growing. Now, legalizing marijuana would provide two key economic benefits. First, governments would receive large amounts of tax revenues. And second, governments would recover money being currently wasted on marijuana-related expenditures. My first support is that billions of taxpayer dollars are currently being wasted on marijuana-related expenditures. Contrary to the point of these expenses, a study done by the United Nations estimates that marijuana-specific trafficking into the U.S. has increased by 20% over the last 40 years. An assessment of the amount of money spent on marijuana prohibition done by Forbes reports that $41.8 billion could be saved and redirected elsewhere in the U.S. budget. Another billion dollars in the U.S. would be saved by releasing those convicted of marijuana-related offenses, and thus the overcrowding of prisons would also experience a sharp decline. Now I'm going to negate my first counterpoint. Dun, 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 counterpoints. The counterpoint is, marijuana is a gateway drug. But I'm here to tell you that marijuana is not a gateway drug, and it is incorrect to try and correlate people's use of marijuana to people's use of other harder drugs. The simplest refutation of the gateway theory is the basic fact that most marijuana users just don't use other drugs, as the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration reports. More than 100 million Americans have tried marijuana, and 14.4 million Americans are estimated to be past month users. Yet there are only an estimated 2,075,000 past month users of cocaine and 153,000 past month users of heroin. Based on these numbers, it's clear that most marijuana users don't progress to harder drugs. In 2006, the University of Pittsburgh released a thorough study in which researchers spent 12 years tracking a group of subjects from adolescence into adulthood and documented the initiation and progression of their drug use. The researchers found that the gateway theory was not only wrong, but also harmful to properly understanding and addressing drug abuse. The evidence supports what's known as the common liability model, an emerging theory that states the likelihood that someone will transition to the use of illegal drugs is determined not by the preceding use of a particular drug, but instead by the user's individual tendencies and environmental circumstances. The fact of the matter is, marijuana is simply the most common and easily obtained drug. I mean, it's not surprising that most people who have used harder drugs have tried marijuana first. My second support is that governments would receive large amounts of tax revenues by legalizing marijuana and selling it at certified government vendors. The most widely accepted and proposed plan for a taxing system mirrors the system set up for alcohol and cigarettes. A study done by Cato estimates that with the new system in place, revenues to the U.S. could range anywhere from $40 to $100 billion a year. The newly received tax revenues could be redirected to other underfunded programs of the federal government, say transportation or education perhaps. The newly gained funds could also be redirected toward marijuana assistance centers for those who have become addicts and who have hurt themselves from their addiction. Now I'm going to debate my second and final counterpoint. Dun, 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 counterpoints. The counterpoint is, marijuana is very dangerous, but I'm here to tell you that marijuana is not inherently dangerous, and it only becomes dangerous when one abuses it, similar to any other drugs, say alcohol, cigarettes. In England and Wales, where an alcohol, drugs, and tobacco study was conducted, cannabis was said to have helped cause 17 deaths compared to the 6,627 for alcohol and 86,500 for tobacco. It's ridiculous that these more dangerous and impairing drugs like alcohol and tobacco are legal and marijuana is kept illegal. There's been no significant evidence to suggest that marijuana users have had any long-term physical or mental impairments. The temporary effects of marijuana are an impairment to short-term memory and feelings of panic or distress, all of which dissipate after the intoxication. Now it's time to wrap up my presentation with my conclusion. Marijuana would provide a much-needed economical boost to nations like the U.S. in this time of economical distress. Legalizing marijuana would provide funds from tax revenues and would allow for the recovery of wasted funds spent on marijuana prohibition. It's ridiculous that all this money is being wasted in this massive market is not being taken advantage of. Furthermore, marijuana is not dangerous and is not a gateway drug. All this money could be received at such a low risk to public health and safety. A total of $142.8 billion could be available in the U.S. alone. A total of $142.8 billion could be available in the U.S. alone through the legalization of marijuana. Globally, legalizing marijuana would boost many struggling economies and will help raise many GDPs, which in turn would create jobs for, say, college graduates. To be conclusive, there are so many more benefits to the legalization of marijuana, so nations should legalize marijuana and stop the pointless prohibition. Thank you.